Idaho Public Television's coverage of the Idaho vote continues.
Mark Johnson back in Boise for our continuing statewide coverage of the Idaho vote here on primary night 1984. I should tell you that we are going to preempt some of our regularly scheduled programming coming up tonight so we can continue our coverage of the Idaho vote. And we hope to have some legislative races out of Ada County. Some of the races, perhaps some of the most important legislative races in the entire state. We've been waiting patiently for 2 hours now, for not so patiently in the last hour, for some of those results, and we don't have them. What we do have for you are the latest statewide totals, however, in the top of the ticket races, and they don't reflect much of a change. George Hansen continues to maintain his 53 to 47% vote lead over Dan Adamson. Hansen is actually about not quite 2,500 votes ahead of Adamson now. But again, this does not reflect a huge percentage of the vote from Ada County, which is an area that Adamson has been saying for the last couple of weeks that he would do very well. So we'll wait and see on that one. 53-47, and that's the way it's been for over an hour now. Presidential race, the top of the ticket race for the Democratic Party tonight. And Colorado Senator Gary Hart, who was here just in Idaho, in Boise, just last week, is doing very well against former Vice President Walter Mondale, 58 to 32% of the vote there. And the Democratic top of the ticket race for the U.S. Senate, I think we can safely call that Pete Bush now has won the Democratic nomination and will face Republican two-term incumbent Jim McClure in November. Bush with 63% of the vote, Hathaway with 37% of the vote. We said earlier, as we talked with former Governor Cecil Andrus and former Governor Robert Smiley about the effect of this primary election on the Democratic ticket today in terms of the presidential sweepstakes. It really doesn't mean much. It's what they call a beauty contest. The real action will come actually on Thursday night in 44 county caucuses around the state. Bruce Reichert has a report now on how those caucuses will work and how the delegates will be decided.
Even as early as several weeks ago, most political pundits figured that frontrunner Walter Mondale had all but sewed up the Democratic presidential nomination. But as political columnist David Broder says, Democrats have refused to give Mondale what he wants, much like a girl turning her head at the last moment to avoid a kiss. This means that Idaho's presidential primary has finally taken on some significance. This is Idaho's third Democratic presidential primary. Favorite son Frank Church won the first one in 1976, and President Jimmy Carter won the second one in 1980. There are only 22 Idaho delegates at stake, but the Mondale and Hart people see a lot riding on those 22 delegates.
We're coming into the final stage of the campaign on the way to California, and I see our state as a stepping stone to California and to the western primaries, where it could really have an effect.
This is Idaho. We want to do the best we can here in the state. On the other hand, we know that Idaho is part of the West, and from Hart's strategy, the West is obviously quite crucial.
Steve Shaw is the state coordinator for Senator Gary Hart. He helped open up Hart's campaign headquarters in Boise 2 weeks ago, and there's been a flurry of activity ever since. It's a low-budget campaign manned by volunteers on phones, and interestingly, it has not been aimed at getting the vote out today.
Have you decided what candidate you might be supporting in this year's presidential preference caucus? Hello?
Whenever we make phone calls or write letters or speak to folks one-on-one, we're really emphasizing, sure, please go vote in the primary, but what we really need you is at the caucus. And that is where our efforts are focused right now.
His reasoning is really quite simple. The Idaho presidential primary is a beauty contest. But if you were one of those who thought your vote today for Mondale or Hart, Jackson or LaRouche mattered, you were wrong. Regardless of the outcome of the vote, whether it's a landslide or not is not binding on the delegates. And more than one presidential candidate has won the popular vote only to lose the all-important delegate count. No, if you want to influence presidential politics, you're going to have to vote again, this time Thursday night in one of the state's 44 different county caucuses. And if you live in Ada County, you're going to have to come here to this Boise High School.
When the people come to the caucuses Thursday night, they will fill out a pledge that says that they support the Democratic Party.
Pat Costello is the Ada County Democratic chairman. He will preside over those Ada County Democrats who gather at Boise High School Thursday evening. Every registered Democrat in the county can vote in the caucus, but Costello expects only about 2,000 hardy souls. He explained what will happen when they get there.
The total number in each sub-caucus will then determine the number of delegates that that sub-caucus can elect to the state convention. After that number has been announced, each sub-caucus will then select the delegates that it will send to the state convention, and that concludes the business of the caucus.
4 years ago, the delegates were chosen before the primary. This year, at least, you're choosing them 2 days after the primary. And yet, the primary really isn't going to help determine who's going to get the delegates. It seems like a lot of extra work and, frankly, a lot more confusion.
Well, I couldn't disagree with that at all. I think it's unfortunate that Idaho can't select its delegates on the basis of just the primary returns. The reason for that is that Idaho has an open primary, and anyone can participate in either party's primary regardless of whether they are in fact a member of that party. I would much prefer us to go to direct election of the delegates so that the people at the primary would be directly determining who their state would support in the presidential nominating process.
But Mondale's state coordinator disagrees.
I don't think so. I like the way we have it structured right now, where it's a totally grassroots effort. People have to show up and they have to sign their names to an affidavit, say that they're active Democrats, and show up and as grassroots a process, as you can imagine, elect the nominee from that particular state. I don't mind this process at all. I think it helps us organize as Democrats. And really what's going to happen on Thursday night is that it's our night. It's the Democrats' night in Idaho. And the focus will be on us as we go through the process of selecting our nominee from Idaho.
So does this mean that today's presidential primary vote was meaningless? That it has no effect on how Idaho's 22 delegates will be chosen?
The conventional wisdom now is that Hart may win the primary but may lose caucuses because of endorsements or organization or money that the other side may have.
Even though it doesn't directly impact the selection of the delegates, it will have a strong psychological impact, I believe, on the people who participate in the caucuses. I think there are a lot of people like myself who intend to go to those caucuses on Thursday and support the candidate that was the winner at the primary in their county or in the state. And so I expect tonight's results to have a substantial impact on the results of the caucus.
I guess it doesn't, as Steve Shaw was saying in that videotape piece, the conventional wisdom has it that Hart might win the popular vote, which he is certainly doing tonight, by about a 2-to-1 margin over Walter Mondale, and perhaps lose the caucuses on Thursday night. And we'll wait to see whether that happens. Steve Shaw, who is Gary Hart's Idaho coordinator, is with us tonight. Mr. Shaw is a college professor over at Northwest Nazarene College in Nampa. He's been running the Hart campaign, and very successfully. Congratulations. Well, I guess it's a big victory for you tonight. You weren't expecting this, were you?
No, I wasn't, as a matter of fact. It's been interesting in the last couple of days getting all the phone calls asking, well, how do you think it's going to turn out? Will they get 55%? Will they get 60%? And having run for office once before myself, I know you never count the figures prematurely. Thomas Dewey found that out in 1948. So you have to be careful of reading too much into a situation, and it's still early in the evening with not all the results in, but we are pleased, obviously, with how it came out.
It would seem to me not to take any great computer wizardry to declare that Hart is the winner, and I'm just told that United Press International has declared him the winner in Idaho tonight.
I would agree.
And one of the Mondale partisans here, Cecil Andrus, says he'll agree. What does this say about how this is going to go down to the convention now? Idaho will take only 22 delegates to the convention, but this has got to be an important, in terms of momentum for Hart.
Sure, it adds several things. One, perhaps most importantly, is the fact that it continues his string of victories in the western states. There have been other states, Wisconsin namely, where Senator Hart won the primary, even though he didn't win it by a large margin, but nonetheless won the primary and then proceeded to lose the caucus race. He did the opposite of that in Vermont, where he won the primary with about 71% of the vote and won the caucus by about 51 to 32%. So we're hoping that that doesn't, the Wisconsin factor doesn't happen here in Idaho, that on Thursday night we'll be able to get our supporters there to the county caucuses and have the majority of those caucuses, or at least the majority of those delegates, go for Gary Hart.
Well, Steve Sanders, I know he thinks he's got his troops lined up in pretty good shape for Thursday night.
Well, one thing about it, we Democrats have two good candidates and we can easily support them. The problem is going to be, as usual, we fight with one another. We go to the convention and we have a winner and he's tired and skinned up, and the Republicans are smart enough to sit back and save their money, and their candidate's sitting under a sun lamp getting a suntan, as we are here tonight. But no, I think that Fritz Mondale will do very well Thursday evening.
Let me ask both of you about what this says about a Democrat, Gary Hart, perhaps being able to run well in the West, which has been a Republican stronghold, and frankly, the place where Ronald Reagan kind of went after Jimmy Carter in 1980.
Well, yes, but if you count the electoral votes, it's not that significant. Psychologically, yes, it is.
Mr. Shaw?
If you take the 100th meridian, where you draw it down, say, through Oklahoma City, and go west from there, out of the 270 electoral college votes that are available in November, the West has about 161 of those. So it's a significant number, not enough in and of itself to guarantee any candidate the nomination, or the presidency for that matter. But obviously one of the key stratagems in Gary Hart's campaign has been focusing on his appeal in the West and the factor of independence of mind and kind of a new voice in the western United States. Whether or not that continues in California, we'll see on June 5th.
George McGovern said on one of the Sunday morning interview programs last Sunday that there ought to be a Mondale-Hart ticket. That would be the best way to heal up the wounds, and that process ought to go ahead right now, and Democrats ought to make every possible effort not to go into a convention and have a fight over credentials, or have a fight over where Mondale's money has come from and all those sorts of things. Is that possible?
That would be nice, but I think, knowing the Democrats as I do, and I think Mr. Shaw would agree with me, that's not very likely to happen prior to the convention, because they're going to want to fight it out. Both of them will want the top. But if you count up, Mark, if you count up the delegates to date, Gary Hart has got an insurmountable hurdle to overcome. But no, I suspect that
but these guys think that some of those folks are going to realize or think that Walter Mondale can't possibly beat Ronald Reagan in November, and they're going to jump ship come San Francisco time.
If that happens, you get to San Francisco, then you get into a brokered convention thing and everybody loses, and I hope that doesn't happen. I can go with that ticket, but it's good advice coming from George McGovern, but George McGovern didn't do very well before either.
Mr. Shaw, how do you feel about that? Are we going to see a convention where Democrats are going to punch each other up and Ronald Reagan will sit back and look great all the time?
I don't think, obviously, you'll see a 1968 Chicago-style convention where you have riots in the streets and inside the convention hall as well. The argument that if we fight it out too much now, that will give an insurmountable odd to overcome on behalf of Ronald Reagan in November is a good argument to a point, but it also assumes that Ronald Reagan would not think of these things to do had we not been having this kind of fight. Charges he can make against both Vice President Mondale and Senator Hart. But I've had a lot of people call me up and say, we're glad it's a close race. It shows some competition. It shows differences of opinion. It shows issues that people can have a disagreement about. And it gives some excitement to a convention that's going to occur later this summer. And it shows to states like Idaho and California and others who have theirs in June that the thing isn't over with when they have their primaries. So whether or not Gary Hart can get the nomination obviously remains to be seen. He does face an insurmountable hurdle, perhaps. But I think it will be an interesting convention. I don't think it'll be one that'll be so contentious that it will, tear the party asunder and make it difficult to regroup by the November election.
Okay. Two Democrats, appreciate your both providing your perspective on Idaho's little spot and perhaps not so little spot in the Democratic presidential politics. Mr. Shaw, we thank you for being here tonight. We do believe, I believe, have some additional legislative results now from a number of races from around the state. We'll try to update as many of those for you as possible. I'm not precisely sure where I should go here. Somebody perhaps could tell me. We have some results finally in Ada County in the race where incumbent Republican Chris Hooper has been facing a tough race. We have a little background on that story, on that race, and then we'll bring you those results.
I don't know why the far right wants to bring government into religion.
Chris Hooper has, throughout most of his legislative career, been at odds with the far right wing of the Republican Party. He has supported local option taxation, voted against right to work, and this year spearheaded an effort to pass a 4-cent sales tax bill.
He has broken with many, many planks of the Republican Party.
So he's not really
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Not in my view.
For the second time in as many elections, conservative Dan Donahue, Hooper calls him a far right-wing conservative, is challenging the incumbent over whether Hooper is too liberal to represent his district. 2 years ago, Donahue lost, but it was close, 207 votes. This year, Hooper has worked hard, going door to door in District 16 and spending a lot of his own money.
We're going to blow 15,000.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money for a primary, but I think it's worth it. I like the job. I want to keep on at the job, so I'm putting whatever I can into it.
Donahue also spent a lot of money on the race, apparently much of it financial support from pro-right-to-work groups. If Chris Hooper survives this election, he could well be a candidate for election as Speaker of the House in 1985 in a new, much larger and much changed Idaho House of Representatives.
I believe we have some results now in the Hooper-Donahue race, and Hooper is leading at this point, and these are, I'm sorry to say, the first results we have had out of Ada County tonight in the Republican race, and Hooper is the incumbent and he's ahead. Again, this is not a tremendous number of votes counted so far because of some problems at Ada County election headquarters, but Hooper is ahead of Dan Donahue by 54 to 46% of the vote. This is the most expensive race in Idaho legislative politics this year, an expensive legislative primary race, and one where a moderate has been taken on really hard by a conservative, and apparently Hooper is holding his own against that challenge tonight. The other major race that we've been watching and want to continue to watch throughout the rest of this evening in Ada County involves the only two incumbents have been thrown together in the same district due to reapportionment, Lyman Winchester and Jerry Deckard. Here's some background on their race.
One of these two men, six-term legislator from Kuna, Lyman Gene Winchester, and freshman Representative Jerry Deckard of Eagle, will not be here next year. Court-ordered reapportionment forced the only contest between incumbent Republicans here in largely rural western Ada County.
Mr. Deckard and myself are just the opposite ends of the spectrum. He voted every tax increase, I opposed them all. He voted every supplemental budget, I opposed him. He voted for every fee increase, I opposed him. So they do have a choice.
At least as I see the issues is whether we, between my opponent and myself, whether we're going to send someone to the State House that can work towards solving the problems of state and developing some solutions and some goals and objectives for the future, or whether we're going to send someone down there to essentially vote no and obstruct.
Winchester boasts of saying no to much of the legislation that comes before him in Boise. Where do you think the main line of Republicanism is, and where do you stand in relationship to it?
I'm quite convinced that it's much more conservative than the legislature makeup. And I think those people are, in some districts, maybe downtown Boise or something like that, the cross-section may be more towards the middle. But out there in the hinterlands where people roll up their sleeves and work for a living, they're conservative. They don't want all this big government and taxes, and they're not out of step with the people that, like myself, that represent those folks.
I think I'm right in the mainstream, and I think that's the Republican Party has got to come out. It has come out in a leadership role as far as what we're going to do with education and the future of our country as far as the education process works. There is some moderation there. I think that's the mainstream of the Republican Party. I am conservative. Whether, you know, how you want to identify a conservative or a moderate or whatever, but when it comes to running my business and when it comes to expecting government to act responsibly, I'm a conservative. But I also know that when we talk about education, for instance, the alternatives are rather limited to how you're going to arrive at gaining the dollars that it takes to educate the kids. And the people have said that they want that responsibility put on a broad-based tax with the government, with state government. That's where it's got to come from.
We have a slew of results from Ada County now, finally, including first, we'll take a look at how it's going in that particular race between Jerry Deckert and Lyman Winchester, and Winchester is in front at this point, 401 votes to 288 for Deckert. These are the only two incumbents that have been thrown together due to reapportionment in the primary, and Winchester at this point is enjoying a lead over Deckert. Elsewhere in Ada County races tonight, this is a Democratic House race. Shirley House is out in front by a 56-44 percentage margin in her race for a Democratic nomination for the same that will face the winner of the Deckert-Winchester race in the fall. These are with about 1/3 of the Ada County precincts now reporting. Another House race in Ada County, Jim Golder, although he has said he has withdrawn from the race, there's been some confusion about just whether he was a candidate or not. He is trailing Emerson Smock in that race in District 16. 53-47 Smock ahead at this point. Elsewhere in Ada County, this is the Donahue-Hooper race. We reported nothing changed there from just a moment ago. 54-46 Hooper ahead in that one. Elsewhere in Ada County, this is Harry Stone's race in District 17. This is a new district that's changed due to reapportionment. He's in front 56-44. Both of these folks are newcomers. A House Republican race in District 18. Bayer is ahead of Manault. Bayer has been endorsed by the Republican Central Committee in the county. Manault, a former Democrat. House District race, House Seat A, I should say, a Democratic race. Mary Hinson is leading there. She was endorsed by the Democrats in Ada County, who said that Cook was a LaRouche Democrat. Elsewhere in the county, Darrell Salaz is leading Steve Hamilton. Salaz, a former member of the House, tried once before unsuccessfully to run for the Senate. He is ahead in that race in a Democratic primary in Ada County. This is the big floterial race in Ada County, a county-wide district here. Boyd Hill, a conservative Republican, is at this point by a 54-46 lead over Dean Chatburn. Chatburn is an assistant superintendent in the Boise School District. So those are some of the Ada County races that we're finally glad to have for you at this point tonight. Governor Andrus, any surprises in that group to you?
Well, no, I don't think there's any surprises there. The Winchester race, Bob and I were discussing that earlier. I think that that one has still got room to go either way, but I suspect that it's a little early to call it.
Governor Smiley?
I think I'd agree with that. It's a pretty small sample of both. Yeah. And Mr. Deckert has a lot of strength out there in that western end of the county. Whether it's counted or not, you can't tell from just raw figures.
And again, I should emphasize that's just with 1/3 of the Ada County precincts reporting at this point. We're going to take a break in just a moment and do some local updating from our various election headquarters around the state in Pocatello and Moscow and here in Boise. And then we'll be back in the next half hour of our coverage. And among other things, we hope to be talking to Congressman George Hansen from Pocatello, where he's been watching the vote come in tonight rather slowly in Ada County. We'll get his thoughts on how this election is affecting him and what he might perhaps be looking forward to in November, and we'll be doing that. He is still maintaining about a 53-47 percentage point lead over Dan Adamson, his Republican challenger. United Press International has now called Pete Bush clearly the winner in the Democratic primary for the Senate, and Colorado Senator Gary Hart, as we've mentioned, is about a 2-to-1 victor tonight over Walter Mondale in the Democratic preference primary here in Idaho. I'm Mark Johnson in Boise. Idaho Public Television's coverage of the Idaho vote will continue.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Reichert. In the next 5 minutes, we're going to be looking at some of the county returns in southwestern Idaho. Here with me tonight is Dr. Orville Cope, a political scientist of the College of Idaho. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, we're also going to be trying to do an interconnect with Mike Johnson, who has an apparently insurmountable lead in his race for Ada County Commissioner. But first, let's go to some of those commissioners' races in Ada County. In the District 1 Commissioner's race, Mike Johnson has 72% of the vote, and obviously a much favored candidate over George Bennett. As I mentioned earlier, Bennett had tried to paint him as inexperienced and a professional politician, but to no avail. In the District 2 race, Vern Emery is still trailing his opponent, Doyle Minor. To some people that might be a shocker, but obviously Minor spent a lot of time and money on signs, and it seems to be paying off. In the race for Republican sheriff, Vaughn Killeen apparently has an insurmountable lead over Bill Jones and George Logan. Killeen with 49% of the vote. And we do have some returns in from the coroner's race. Erwin Sonnenberg is leading that with 41% of the vote. In Canyon County, with 40 of the 43 precincts reporting, Glenn Koch is holding on to his lead. He's the incumbent. He was named to replace Gerald Jensen when Jensen resigned as commissioner, and it looks like Jensen is not going to get his job back. In the other District 2 commissioner's race in Canyon County, Del Hobza has been destroyed by Joyce Chase, a homemaker. Chase has amassed 55% of the vote to Hobbs's 25% of the vote. And in the interesting race for Canyon County Sheriff, it looks as if Bill Anderson is going to win that. In fact, we do have a final on that one. Anderson has won that with 3,104 votes. That's Bill Anderson will be the Republican nominee for Ada County Sheriff. So we have some finals in Elmore County also. An interesting race in District 1 Commissioner's race between Bud Riddle and Barry Peterson. Last time we reported, Bud Riddle, the incumbent, was ahead. Well, he's still ahead, but there's only a 9-vote difference, 703 to 693, and there are 37 absentee votes out. And so those absentee votes are going to determine that race. And at this point, we're not going to be able to call a winner on that one, even though that's a final. In the other commissioner's race for District 2, John Schrum has won over John Heiler. Schrum has amassed 59% of the vote. That's for commissioner from District 2. And in the sheriff's race there, David Purcell has won over Merle Hillman. Purcell has amassed 56% of the vote to Hillman's 44%. The winner of that race will face Larry Olson, the county's chief deputy, in November. In the Adams County race, we have incumbent Jim Heilman with 64% of the vote over Paul Clegg. That's with 5 of 6 precincts reporting. And in the sheriff's race, Frank Gurton appears to be swamping his opponent, Richard Waters. Gurton has 77% of the vote. And as I mentioned earlier, R.D. Wood, the Adams County assessor, has been recalled. In Jerome County, with 10 of 14 precincts reporting, Elza Hall, the incumbent, appears to be leading handily over Larry Gold. Hall has 66% of the vote on that one. And we have a final in Owyhee County, with 12 of the 12 precincts reporting. Richard Prescott has beat Lloyd Wutheridge, 373 to 329. Prescott is the son of Canyon County Sheriff John Prescott. His father lost, but obviously the son won. And we have a final in the Twin Falls County race, the prosecuting attorney's race. It's the only race in Twin Falls in the county races. Kay Ellen Baxter has defeated Golden Bennett and Frank Dykus. Baxter, a woman running for prosecuting attorney Republican. The incumbent resigned. I think we have no more time left, so we'll take you back now to Mark Johnson.
Serving all of Idaho from Pocatello, Moscow, and Boise, this is the Idaho Educational Public Broadcasting System. Idaho Public Television's coverage of the Idaho vote continues.
Mark Johnson back in Boise with our statewide coverage of the Idaho primary here on election night 1984. The program regularly scheduled to begin is going to be delayed for a while so we can continue to stay with some of these races that we have not completely decided. Let's update for you the top of the ticket races where there is virtually no change, but we do have some new numbers. First, the congressional race, George Hansen and Dan Adamson. The percentage has changed slightly, and that perhaps reflects some of the Ada County vote, which is now starting to be figured into these totals. George Hansen with 52% of the vote, Dan Adamson with 48%. It had been a 53-47 split some 15-20 minutes ago when we last looked. This is with 73% of the vote now counted. And this does reflect some Ada County returns, although not, I think, more than a sprinkling and a handful. And Ada County has been, as I've said a number of times throughout the evening, never been a strong George Hansen area. So we'll have to wait and see, and we'll keep an eye closely on those Ada County results. Rest of the top of the ticket races, the Democratic presidential preference primary, the situation does not change very much there. Gary Hart still with about a 2-to-1 lead over former Vice President Walter Mondale. United Press International has declared Hart the winner in Idaho. And in the U.S. Senate race in Idaho, Pete Bush, United Press International has also declared him the winner over Louis Hathaway, 62-38. And Mr. Bush is already tonight making plans to run against Jim McClure in November. In Pocatello, we do have a result there from a legislative race also where a former member of the Idaho legislature, Beverly Beislein, is winning easily tonight against former American Falls Mayor Mert Ferguson. Beislein with about 70% of the vote there. That's for District 17 Democratic nomination for the state legislature. Mert Ferguson losing that race, Beislein winning easily. I believe Mrs. Beislein is with us in Pocatello. I'm not sure about that. Yes, yep. There she is. She's been waiting patiently for some time, and I'm delighted that she's been so patient with us, and we're glad to have you. It looks like you're winning easily. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I know that Democrats have been criticized in Bannock County in this campaign for basically not being very effective in the legislature simply because they're Democrats and the legislature dominated by Republicans. The Republicans have put together a fairly effective slate, a good slate of candidates to run against you in the fall. Going to be tough for Democrats in Bannock County, a Democratic stronghold? I'm sorry, excuse me, we've apparently lost your audio for just a second. If you'll hang in there, perhaps we can come back in just a moment. I'm sorry to do that to you. I do have a message here from United Press International that Louis Hathaway, who was defeated today in his bid to face Senator James McClure in November, says now that he will support the Democratic nominee of the party, Pete Bush. Hathaway says he lost to Bush because of Bush's strong stand against McClure's wilderness bill. Hathaway says he doesn't support new wilderness in Idaho. The loser also said union members failed to turn out today in large numbers to vote for him. He also says that hurt Walter Mondale's Idaho campaign. I don't know about that. We'll have to see. Much of former Vice President Mondale's strength among union voters, I would expect to show up in the caucuses on Thursday night. The organized labor has put a lot of effort into the caucuses, not only here but elsewhere across the country.
That'd be the only place that you could judge it. I don't think that there was a significant amount of that you can attribute to labor in this turnout. This is the people across Idaho, and I just don't accept that analysis.
Okay. Beverly Beislein is back with us. I apologize to you for having the problems with the audio. I was going to ask you about the charge that Republicans have made in Bannock County that Democrats in the legislature, and the delegation is all Democratic at this point, that those Democrats have not been very effective in the legislature because they don't get much done in a legislature dominated by Republicans, and that Republicans have tried to make that an issue. Can they be successful with an issue like that?
Well, on the contrary, I think that the Democrats have been very effective, and I think part of the problem is that we need more of them.
You will run against, in November, against the Pocatello mayor, Ed Brown, a Republican, who's been quite a popular mayor. I would imagine that would be a tough race.
It may be. It remains to be seen, but I'm confident that I can defeat him.
Okay. Any other surprises that you've seen in your part of the state tonight? I know there haven't been a lot of primary races, but any other surprises for you tonight?
No, not really. There were very, very few contested races in this area, and the one that, you know, my own in the legislative race and a sheriff's race here in Bannock County that was about it, plus the U.S. Senate and the presidential primary in the Democrats. And, of course, everyone is watching how the Adamson-Hansen race is going to come out. That's what stirred up the excitement in this area, are those few contested races.
Let me ask you a question that I've put to a number of people tonight. As a candidate who has been on the line, so to speak, in campaigning for the last few weeks, did you find that a lot of folks were just flat out confused by this reapportionment issue and maybe were turned off in voting today because of the confusion or the perception that there's been a lot of confusion?
No, on the contrary, I don't think people were all that confused. I think the fact that there were not a lot of exciting races turned voters off more than anything. When voters understood, here again in our area, that it was Bannock and Power counties, oh yes, well I understand that. And I think that by newspapers and some of the media saying that, oh, everybody's all confused, makes them think they're confused when they're really not.
Well, you're good to be so patient and wait so long to chat with us for a moment tonight, and congratulations on your apparent victory there in Pocatello tonight.
Thank you, Mark. It's been very nice to be with you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Beverly Beislein apparently winning easily in a Democratic legislative primary race in Pocatello tonight. We have some additional legislative summaries, I believe, and we can go to those now. This is perhaps going to be one of the upsets of the evening, where Dennis Carlson, a moderate Republican, he calls himself a moderate. This is a final, by the way. 60 to 40% he has defeated incumbent Republican Bill Moore in the primary election there in District 2 for a Senate seat. Now, this is a Kootenai County district that has been in the past divided up between a couple of districts. Kootenai County has in the past been divided between a couple of different districts. But, and so Bill Moore has not had to run in Coeur d'Alene proper, and apparently that has had something to do with his defeat here tonight at the hands of Dennis Carlson. Mr. Carlson is a farmer from Post Falls, and I think we might have to call that one of the upsets of the evening, Governor Enders.
Well, I think it is one of the upsets of the evening, Mark. I would agree. However, the three of us talked about it earlier and said that we thought Bill Moore was in trouble.
Let's look at some of the other races in northern Idaho now. We have some of the results in several different legislative primary races there now. I'm not sure what we have up next. This is the Calabretta-Wheaton race. This is for the Senate, District 3. And Marty Calabretta is apparently going to be the victor there. She enjoys a 65 to 35 vote advantage at this point over her opponent in the Democratic primary there. For House Seat B in District 3, and this one has turned around since we last looked at it. Emory Headland, a former Democratic member of the House who was affected a couple of years ago by legislative reapportionment, and in effect sort of reapportioned out of a seat, jumped back in apparently in this race and is doing well against Dorothy McCann. That reflects, he was trailing earlier in the evening, but he has a 52 to 48 vote percentage lead now over Dorothy McCann, who is the incumbent in that race. Elsewhere in northern Idaho, this is the Republican nomination for the big Floterial district up there that includes the most of the extreme northern counties down through Shoshone and Benewah County. Mr. Nixon is one of the attorneys who brought the famous reapportionment case against the legislature and argued it successfully through district court and through the through the state Supreme Court, and he apparently is on his way to winning that one fairly easily over Ron Rankin, who is described even by most Republicans as a far-right winger. 57-43, Mr. Nixon winning that one. Apparently that's with 56% of the vote counted, but he enjoying a substantial lead. The winner there will face incumbent Vern Lannon in the fall. The Floterial District House seat in northern Idaho, and Frank Finley is holding on to a narrow lead there. Actually, I should correct myself and say that that one's turned around too since we last looked at it. Curry was ahead the last time we looked at that race. Findlay out in front. He's the incumbent, but this is the Floterial District that covers several northern Idaho counties. 51-49, he's in front of Curry in that particular race. Not sure that we have anything else from northern Idaho at this point. Is there some, it seems to me that I don't want to overstate the trend of the moderate Republican and the conservative Republican, but in a number of races, and we're still waiting on some of those key ones in both Ada County and the Magic Valley, but it would appear that moderate Republicans are doing pretty well when matched up head-on-head against conservative Republicans.
It would seem so. Of course, I think with the Carlson-Moore race in North Idaho, probably there was quite a bit of lottery in that decision. And it's true that Mr. Carlson did call himself a moderate, but I would think that moderation might be a little easier to manage as contrasted with Senator Moore, who tends to be quite conservative. I think that there has been a little bit of a swing in the wind, if you want to pull it that way, and a trend sort of away from a hardline conservative attitude that has dominated Republican politics for perhaps the last dozen years.
I would assume that you think that's a healthy trend.
Well, I think that progress is always found in the middle of the road in this system. And if the Republican Party wants to continue to govern the state, I suspect it better get around to preempting the center of the road again. And I hope that's the direction in which they're moving. That's the way they'll get the State House back.
Governor Andrews?
Well, I guess maybe the future will tell whether you're right or not, Bob, as to whether they will. But yes, seldom does either end of the spectrum on the radical side have the total amount. But I would point out that Bill Moore made some other mistakes up there, and I don't think it's so much of the title, conservative versus moderate, as it is that he opposed education. He opposed some of the other major things, and the people knew that he opposed education, and they voted on the issue. They did not vote whether he was conservative or moderate or liberal.
I've been waiting all evening to ask you, and you knew I was going to ask you. Bob Smiley says moderation is a way for the Republicans to get the State House back. Everybody I talk to thinks C. Sanders is going to run for governor again. Do you want to give us a scoop here tonight?
Well,
I'll bet you don't, but go ahead and finesse me anyway.
I don't think, Mark, that this is any time for me to making any great pronouncements, particularly when I haven't made up my own mind. And if I were to tell you before my wife and I figured it out, she'd have her say so when I got home. But I admit to the interest, and we're looking at it. But there's a lot of time down there. We'll see whether Bob's right. Do they move off of the right, or can we continue to move over against him?
You've tried to make political comebacks in Idaho with not a remarkable degree of success, Governor. I don't say that with any degree of condescension, but what is it possible to do what some people think C. Sanders should do?
Oh, I would hesitate to say that it was impossible. I think it's a difficult road to travel. I tried it once and found it rocky. And but I think every year is a different year. I could startle him tonight and announce for lieutenant governor, for instance.
On which ticket?
But I don't think that would sell either.
Well, that'd make an interesting ticket. I would stay up late on election night to see how the two of you do. I know that. We have some results now in various legislative races in Canyon County that we can report, and several of these are finals. In this particular race in Canyon County, incumbent Carol Dean has been defeated tonight by Schaefer. That's another incumbent who I think you could say, I don't want to toss these labels around too loosely tonight, conservative, moderate, whatever. Dean has been a conservative. He did vote, however, for the sales tax increase, and Mr. Schaefer criticized him for that, saying that he had said that he would not vote for it and then turned around and voted for it and supported the money for education through raising the sales tax, and he has lost tonight in Canyon County. Another Canyon County race where an incumbent Republican has been reelected is Dorothy Reynolds. She's been renominated, I should say, with 52% of the vote in a three-way contest. The House race in District 11, House Seat C, the Republican primary, that's a familiar name to a lot of folks in Idaho. Janet Hay, former member or former chairwoman of the State Board of Education, wins that race with 59% of the vote over Kent Marmon, who was a former Republican chairman in Canyon County, with 41% of the vote. Again, a moderate there, Governor Andrus. Certainly Janet Hay is a moderate Republican, beating Mr. Marmon, who was criticized her for a number of things during the campaign, support of the sales tax increase, among others.
Yeah, but again, the common thread that runs throughout Idaho is the education of our children and the care for our children. And Janet has displayed a tremendous amount of concern and as you know, given a great deal of herself and her energies to education. And I think you would have to say that that would be the single ingredient that would be the strongest in the minds of the people. About 3/4 of the total general fund budget of the state of Idaho goes for education in one form or another. And the people, we all want our children to have a good education or a better education than what we might have had available to us. And they're willing to pay for it. And those people that forget that are paying the price there tonight.
Elsewhere in Canyon County, one incumbent has had no difficulty winning re-election tonight. That is Ron Crane. We'll have the numbers there. He's won with 74% of the vote over Eugene Smith, a son of former legislator Virginia Smith. 74-26, the incumbent Republican Crane winning that one. Elsewhere in southwestern Idaho, State Senator David Little held off a challenge and has appeared to have won that with 75% of the vote. It was much closer earlier in the evening, but Senator Little, the incumbent Republican, the chairman of the Finance Committee, a longtime member of the state Senate, apparently has rather easily now won re-election tonight.
That looks more like we had planned early in the evening when the early results came in and the other gentleman was ahead of Dave Little. No, I anticipate he'd win now.
Yeah.
Elsewhere in southwestern Idaho, another incumbent Republican, Bob Fry, has apparently been returned, been renominated, I should say, with 75% of the vote now counted. Fry's from Horseshoe Bend. He's a first-termer who was appointed to replace former Republican Representative Tom Cushman. He's winning with 66% of the vote. The House race B in District 12, the Republican race has been won there apparently by Hoagland. That's with 57% of the vote counted. And this is another interesting one, the House District 13 race. This is for the Big Floterial District, and this is very close now with the incumbent, Mike Strasser. He's not running in the district that he was elected in last time because this is the Big Floterial District that covers several counties. Mrs. Hartung is from Payette. That's a very close race. Strasser was behind earlier in the evening, but it's virtually a dead heat for all practical purposes now. That's with 78% of the vote counted in that Floterial district. The President Pro Tem of the State Senate, Jim Risch, is with us now, I believe, at Republican headquarters here in Ada County, and I'll ask him about a couple of these rather interesting developments in the legislative races here tonight. Thanks for taking time to be with us, Senator. We appreciate it. Bill Moore's race in Kootenai County, does that surprise you, sir?
Well, not really. Bill has always been a very controversial person, and he's had a difficult time every time. And when he ran the first time, they said it was a fluke, and when he ran the second time, they said that it wasn't going to happen. So it really isn't that much of a surprise. But when you get a light turnout like tonight, it's really difficult to show any trends or anything like that.
Is there a, you don't see any trend of saying something one way or the other about the kind of Republican candidates who are winning tonight necessarily as a result of these numbers?
Not at all, Mark. I think that where you have a light turnout like this, it's really impossible to use that as any kind of a trend for what's going to happen in the general election. And of course, that is particularly important to me and to us in the Republican Party. You have to look really at each local race and learn what the rumors were in a particular district and what the idiosyncrasies of the district and the candidate are. And when you do that, sometimes these things aren't really very surprising when you have a light turnout like this.
Our two analysts here, Cecil Andrus and Bob Smiley, have said that they thought there were a number of things that contributed to that Moore defeat, not the least of which was the lottery. Would you expect that to be an issue in November in a number of legislative races?
Mark, I don't think there's any question about that. The lottery probably has caught the fancy of more voters than any issue that I've seen in recent years. And as a result of that, I think it is going to be an issue. We've seen some candidates do a reversal in the campaign from the way that they voted. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think people should go home and listen to the voters. And that's the reason, I think, for some of the flip-flops. But I do think that the lottery is going to be an issue. It is an issue now, and I think it was an issue in some of these races. I think that that was an issue in Bill Moore's campaign, and it's going to be in more campaigns in the fall. People want the right to vote on that. As you know, I voted against that once. In recent years, I've always voted for it because it became very obvious to me that even though I'm personally opposed to it, that 70% or better of the people in my district want that issue. And when you have something that's that important to those people, you are elected to represent those people, you really don't have any choice but to vote for it. And I think it's going to be I think it is going to be an issue in some important and key races.
Let me just ask you quickly, Senator, about the Hansen-Adamson race tonight. The latest figures I've just been handed show that Adamson continues to tighten it up just a little bit as the result from Ada County comes in. Are you surprised by the closeness of that race, and would you expect it to even perhaps get a little closer?
Really not, Mark. Perhaps that's wishful thinking when you talk about tightening it up. As you know, at the outset, I was one of the few that told Representative Hansen that I thought it would be best for Idaho that someone else ran in this particular race. Be that as it may, he's running strongly, and you haven't even seen, I don't think, the far eastern Idaho votes come in, and he always runs very strongly over there. So I think probably George is going to win, and all I can say is that's one of those things.
I asked these two fellows here with me tonight if they had some grudging admiration as one politician to another for the way he's handled it. I guess every politician has some grudging admiration for Congressman Hansen just in terms of the politics of the way he plays these things. Am I right?
Mark, I'm sorry, I've completely lost you. I've got static here, and
okay, I'm sorry too. Thank you very much for joining us. Senator Jim Risch, the President Pro Tem of the State Senate, a Republican from Boise who is running unopposed in the primary here today. He will be the Republican candidate in the Ada County Floterial District in November. We have some new statewide numbers, and as I said a moment ago, Adamson is tightening it up just a little, although the percentages remain about the same, 52 to 48. That's with 89% of the vote now counted. George Hansen with 30,700 votes. Dan Adamson with 28,549, 52 to 48. These are the Democratic numbers. Nothing much changes there. Gary Hart continues to maintain about a 2-to-1 lead over Walter Mondale there. In the Democratic Senate race, top of the ticket race for Democrats there, Pete Bush continues to maintain about that 62% lead over Louis Hathaway. That's with 86% of the vote counted. Those presidential numbers, by the way, were with 86% of the vote counted as well. I don't know. I wish I had a little more information. Perhaps somebody could tell me where these votes are coming from in the Hansen-Adamson race now, but it does appear that it is tightening up just a little bit.
What are the percentages?
52-48 still, but the numbers seem to be, the margin seems to be just a little closer.
What percent of the total vote, estimated?
That is with, according to my figures, 89% of the vote now counted, and much, apparently, the votes that have come in within the last half an hour or so have been almost exclusively Ada County votes.
Be my guess that 2,000 votes is too long a margin to close, even with 11% of the vote still out.
It won't close with that. And you said earlier that Bingham County was having trouble getting their votes in.
That's what I was told. I don't know if this reflects how Bingham County votes.
If that's true, there's no way that the young man can overcome that lead with only 14% of the vote yet to come in.
Mm-hmm. George Hansen has been in Pocatello tonight watching these numbers come in, and we had hoped by this time in the evening to be able to talk to him or to Dan Adamson, whoever was going to win this race. The congressman, I'm told, is still a little reluctant to claim victory tonight for perhaps good reason, but you just heard the analysis here that it would be very difficult for Adamson at this point to close that margin. We still hope that within the next few minutes, perhaps, we can talk to George Hansen from Pocatello. We have a couple of races to update in the Magic Valley now, and both of them are finals. No surprise here, House Speaker Tom Stivers of Twin Falls, the Republican, controversial Speaker of the House, and a Speaker that many people believe to be in some difficulty in winning re-election to that job, should he win re-election himself in November. Stivers has won this race. This is a final now, 54-46 over Doug Bashaw, a retired Air Force officer and a school teacher in the Twin Falls area. Stivers winning 54-46. The other race also a final, and an incumbent there, Noy Brackett, has won re-election. That was a bit closer in the evening, but Brackett has held on. And this is a final, 100% of the vote now totaled. Brackett with 55-45 over his opponent in that particular race for District 23, the Republican nomination in the Magic Valley area. Those are, I guess, not terribly surprising results in light of the fact that you've got an incumbent speaker, although I think my reading of that race might indicate that it was a little closer than many people might have expected.
I think closer than quite a few people expected, although I think that Mr. Brackett's re-election might be of very considerable importance to Mr. Stivers and his aspirations to be re-elected Speaker.
Indeed so. There are a lot of speculation about whether he can hold on, and the makeup of the new legislature certainly will have some effect on that. Either of you have a feel for that? It's pretty difficult to turn out a leader in a powerful position.
Well, he's
like
been a
that.
controversial leader. The votes were the margin was not that wide when he went in. I don't know. I don't have a good feel for it. Maybe Bob does.
I think there'll be a fight, but I'd think, as I mentioned, Mr. Brackett is one of Mr. Stivers' loyal lieutenants, and his re-election. His defeat, for instance, would have taken a strong right arm away, and now it's back again and strong. And I think that Mr. Stivers can take considerable heart from Mr. Brackett's re-election.
I would assume that the way the rest of some of these votes go tonight, and the reflection of the outcome of a number of these primaries, plus the addition of those 21 new members, you'd have to think a majority of those are going to be Republicans, that could have something to do with the leadership races. I don't know.
And there'll be some people that will want to flex their new muscles and show that a floating district is stronger than others. It's just much too early to even guesstimate.
Right.
Well, the dynamics of operating a 74 or what is it? How many members?
82.
82 members is against
It'll be
65.
80,
the whole
84,
dynamic is changed just by the numbers themselves. It'll take a different whole set of techniques. And maybe the ones that elected Mr. Stivers might not work this time.
I think just a quick footnote that the lottery was an issue in that particular race too. Stivers has opposed the lottery vigorously, and Bashaw had advocated at least giving folks a chance to vote on it. So maybe that's another thread that's running through this tonight.